Chapter 11 of Outwitting the Hun, My Escape from a German Prison Camp by Pat O'Brien. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Chapter 11. I Encounter German Soldiers. What the Belgian had told me about the need of a passport gave me fresh cause for worry. Suppose I should run into a German sentry before I succeeded in getting one? I decided that until I reached the big city which the Belgian had mentioned, and which I cannot name for fear of identifying some of the people there who befriended me, I would proceed with the utmost caution. Since I had discarded my uniform and had obtained civilian clothes, I had not been quite as careful as I was at first. While I had done my traveling at night, I had not gone into hiding so early in the morning as before, and I had sometimes started again before it was quite dark, relying upon the fact that I would probably be mistaken for a Belgian on his way to or from work, as the case might be. From now on, I resolved, however, I would take no more chances. That evening I came to a river, perhaps 75 yards wide, and I was getting ready to swim it when I thought I would walk a little way to find, if possible, a better place to get to the river from the bank. I had not walked more than a few hundred feet when I saw a boat. It was the first time I had seen a boat in all my experiences. It was firmly chained, but as the stakes were sunk in the soft bank, it was not much of a job to pull them out. I got in, drank to my heart's content, shoved over to the other side, got out, drove a stake into the ground, and moored the boat. It would have been a simple matter to have drifted down the river, but the river was not shown on my map, and I had no idea where it might lead me. Very reluctantly, therefore, I had to abandon the boat and proceed on foot. I made several miles that night, and before daylight found a safe place in which to hide for the day. From my hiding place I could see through the bushes a heavy, thick wood only a short distance away. I decided that I would start earlier than usual, hurry over to the wood, and perhaps in that way I could cover 2 or 3 miles in the daytime and gain just so much time. Traveling through the wood would be comparatively safe. There was a railroad going through the wood, but I did not figure that that would make it any the less safe. About 3 o'clock that afternoon, therefore, I emerged from my hiding place and hurried into the wood. After proceeding for half a mile or so, I came to the railroad. I took a sharp look in both directions, and seeing no signs of trains or soldiers, I walked boldly over the tracks and continued on my way. I soon came upon a clearing and knew that someone must be living in the vicinity. As I turned a group of trees, I saw a small house and in the distance an old man working in a garden. I decided to enter the house and ask for food, figuring the woman would probably be old and would be no match for me even if she proved hostile. The old woman who came to the door in response to my knock was older even than I had expected. If she wasn't close to 100 years, I miss my guess very much. She could not speak English, and I could not speak Flemish, of course, but nevertheless I made her understand that I wanted something to eat. She came out of the door and hollered for her husband in a shrill voice that would have done credit to a girl of 18. The old man came in from his garden, and between the two of them they managed to get the idea that I was hungry, and they gave me a piece of bread, a very small piece, which was quite a treat. The house they lived in consisted of just 2 rooms, the kitchen and a bedroom. The kitchen was perhaps 14 feet square, 8 feet of one side of it being taken up by an enormous fireplace. What was in the bedroom I had no way of telling, as I did not dare to be too inquisitive. I made the old couple understand that I would like to stay in their house all night, but the old man shook his head. I bade him good-bye and disappeared into the woods, leaving them to speculate as to the strange foreigner they had entertained. From the great density of the population in the section through which I was now passing, I realized that I must be in the outskirts of the big city which the Belgian had mentioned and where I was to procure a passport. Village after village intercepted me, and although I tried to skirt them wherever possible, I realized that I would never make much progress if I continued that course. To gain a mile I would sometimes have to make a detour of 2 or 3. I decided that I would try my luck in going straight through the next village I came to. As I approached it, I passed numbers of peasants who were ambling along the road. I was afraid to mingle with them because it was impossible for me to talk to them, and it was dangerous to arouse suspicion, even among the Belgians. For all I knew, one of them might be treacherous enough to deliver me to the Germans in return for the reward he might be sure of receiving. About 9 o'clock that evening I came to a point where ahead of me on the right was a Belgian police station. I knew it from its red lights, and on the other side of the street were 2 German soldiers in uniform leaning against a bicycle. Here was a problem which called for instant decision. If I turned back, the suspicion of the soldiers would be instantly aroused, and if I crossed the road so as not to pass so closely to them, they might be equally suspicious. I decided to march bravely by the Huns, bluff my way through, and trust to Providence. If anybody imagines, however, that I was at all comfortable as I approached those soldiers, he must think that I am a much braver man than I claim to be. My heart beat so loud I was afraid they would hear it. Every step I took brought me so much nearer to what might prove to be the end of all my hopes. It was a nerve-racking ordeal. I was now within a few feet of them. Another step and they didn't turn a hair. I passed right by them, heard what they were saying, although, of course, I didn't understand it, and went right on. I can't say I didn't walk a little faster as I left them behind, but I tried to maintain an even gait so as not to give them any idea of the inward exultation I was experiencing. No words can explain, however, how relieved I really felt to know that I had successfully passed through the first of a series of similar tests which I realized were in store for me, although I did not know then how soon I was to be confronted with the second. As it was, however, the incident gave me a world of confidence. It demonstrated to me that there was nothing in my appearance, at any rate, to attract the attention of the German soldiers. Apparently I looked like a Belgian peasant, and if I could only work things so that I would never have to answer questions and thus give away my nationality, I figured I would be tolerably safe. As I marched along, I felt so happy I couldn't help humming the air of one of the new patriotic songs that we used to sing at the aerodrome back of Ypres. In this happy frame of mind, I covered the next 3 miles in about an hour, and then I came to another little village. My usual course would have been to go round it, through fields, backyards, woods, or whatever else lay in my way, but I had gained so much time by going through the last village instead of detouring around it, and my appearance seemed to be so unsuspicious that I decided to try the same stunt again. I stopped humming and kept very much on the alert, but apart from that I walked boldly through the main street without any feeling of alarm. I had proceeded perhaps a mile along the main street when I noticed ahead of me 3 German soldiers standing at the curb. Again my heart started to beat fast, I must confess, but I was not nearly so scared as I had been an hour or so before. I walked ahead, determined to follow my previous procedure in every particular. I had got to about 15 feet away from the soldiers when one of them stepped onto the sidewalk and shouted, "Halt!" My heart stopped beating fast. For a moment, I believe, it stopped beating altogether. I can't attempt to describe my feelings. The thought that the jig was up, that all I had gone through and all I had escaped would now avail me nothing, mingled with a feeling of disgust with myself because of the foolish risk I had taken in going through the village, combined to take all the starch out of me, and I could feel myself wilting as the soldier advanced to the spot where I stood rooted in my tracks. I had a bottle of water in one pocket and a piece of bread in the other, and as the Hun advanced to search me, I held the bottle up in one hand and the piece of bread in the other, so that he could see that was all I had. It occurred to me that he would frisk me, that is, feel me over for arms or other weapons, then place me under arrest and march me off to the guard house. I had not the slightest idea but that I was captured, and there didn't seem to be much use in resisting, unarmed as I was, and with two other German soldiers within a few feet of us. Like a flash, it suddenly dawned on me, however, that for all this soldier could have known, I was only a Belgian peasant, and that his object in searching me, which he proceeded to do, was to ascertain whether I had committed the common crime of smuggling potatoes. The Belgians are allowed only a certain amount of potatoes, and it is against the laws laid down by the Huns to deal in vegetables of any kind except under the rigid supervision of the authorities. Nevertheless, it was one of the principal vocations of the average poor Belgian to buy potatoes out in the country from the peasants and then smuggle them into the large cities and sell them clandestinely at a high price. To stop this traffic in potatoes, the German soldiers were in the habit of subjecting the Belgians to frequent search, and I was being held up by this soldier for no other reason than that he thought I might be a potato smuggler. He felt of my outside clothes and pockets, and finding no potatoes, seemed to be quite satisfied. Had he but known who I was, he could have earned an iron cross, or perhaps, in view of the fact that I had a heavy water bottle in my uplifted hand, it might have turned out to be a wooden cross. He said something in German, which of course I did not understand, and then some Belgian peasants came along and seemed to distract his attention. Perhaps he had said, "It's all right, you may go on," or he may have been talking to the others in Flemish, but at any rate, observing that he was more interested in the others than he was in me at the moment, I put the bottle in my pocket and walked on. After I walked a few steps, I took a furtive glance backward and noticed the soldier who had searched me rejoin his comrades at the curb and then stop another fellow who had come along, and then I disappeared in the darkness. I cannot say that the outcome of this adventure left me in the same confident frame of mind that followed the earlier one. It was true I had come out of it all right, but I could not help thinking what a terribly close shave I had. Suppose the soldier had questioned me. The ruse I had been following in my dealings with the Belgian peasants, pretending I was deaf and dumb, might possibly have worked here too, but a soldier, a German soldier, might not so easily have been fooled. It was more than an even chance that it would at least have aroused his suspicions and resulted in further investigation. A search of my clothing would have revealed a dozen things which would have established my identity, and all my shamming of deafness would have availed me nothing. As I wandered along, I knew that I was now approaching the big city which my Belgian friend had spoken of, and which I would have to enter if I was to get the passport, and I realized now how essential it was to have something to enable me to get through the frequent examinations to which I expected to be subjected. While I was still debating in my mind whether it was going to be possible for me to enter the city that night, I saw in the distance what appeared to be an arc light, and as I neared it, that was what it turned out to be. Beneath the light I could make out the forms of 3 guards, and the thought of having to go through the same kind of ordeal that I had just experienced filled me with misgivings. Was it possible that I could be fortunate enough to get by again? As I slowed up a little, trying to make up my mind what was best to do, I was overtaken by a group of Belgian women who were shuffling along the road, and I decided to mingle with them and see if I couldn't convey the impression that I was one of their party. As we approached the arc light, the figures of those 3 soldiers with their spiked helmets loomed up before me like a regiment. I felt as if I were walking right into the jaws of death. Rather than go through what was in store for me, I felt that I would infinitely prefer to be fighting again in the air with those 4 desperate Huns who had been the cause of my present plight. Then at least I would have a chance to fight back. But now I had to risk my life and take what was coming to me without a chance to strike a blow in my own defense. I shall never forget my feelings as we came within the shaft of light projected by that greater arc light, nor the faces of those 3 guards as we passed by them. I didn't look directly at them, but out of the corner of my eye I didn't miss a detail. I held a handkerchief up to my face as we passed them, and endeavored to imitate the slouching gait of the Belgians as well as I could, and apparently it worked. We walked right by those guards, and they paid absolutely no attention to us. If ever a fellow felt like going down on his knees and praying, I did at that moment, but it wouldn't have done to show my elation or gratitude in that conspicuous way. It was then well after 11 o'clock, and I knew it would be unsafe for me to attempt to find a lodging place in the city, and the only thing for me to do was to locate the man whose name the Belgian had given me. He had given me a good description of the street and had directed me how to get there, and I followed his instructions closely. After walking the streets for about half an hour, I came upon one of the landmarks my friend had described to me, and 10 minutes afterward I was knocking at the door of the man who was to make it possible for me to reach Holland and liberty. At least that was what I hoped. End of chapter 11.